Welcome back into the Lions 24/7 podcast. I am Tyler Donahue. You may notice from the background, if you're watching on YouTube, we got palm trees behind us for this edition of the podcast. And we are live on location down here in Fort Lauderdale at our hotel, which is also the home of the press conferences here. We just got out of a joint press conference between James Franklin and Marcus Freeman, one of the final media availabilities leading up to kickoff on Thursday evening here in South Florida. It's currently Wednesday morning, and we're about to get into this game in a really special way. Just a moment, Landon Tengwall, former Nittany Lions offensive lineman. Hopefully you've caught his coverage since he moved into the media world in the last year. He's done a great job throughout the course of this season and really since the offseason of tracking Penn State's development. Does a fantastic job with the X's and O's and the film study, which you'd expect from Landon considering his acumen for this sport and the work he put in within that Penn State facility for multiple years. And after Landon, you'll hear from my colleagues who are here on location with me, Daniel Gallen, Mark Brennan. We'll huddle up. We'll have our conversation about players to watch, key storylines for this matchup as we've gathered some different discussions here in South Florida with Notre Dame and Penn State players and coaches. And ultimately, we will give you our score predictions for the Orange Bowl national semifinal with the trip to a January 20th national championship game on the line. Without further ado, we're going to bring in recently graduated from Penn State University, Landon Tengwall. Landon, first off, congratulations on earning that degree. And second off, it's been really fun following your coverage. I think we had you on during the preseason. I know you promised a big year of coverage. You have delivered it with your Behind the Wall with Landon Tengwall, a YouTube page. I know you're dabbling in a lot of different areas this season, but hats off to you. You've made the most of this opportunity. I hope you feel proud of what you've accomplished during your last time on campus as a student.
I appreciate it, Tyler. Thanks for having me on, man. Yeah, it's definitely been a ride from going from making that obviously decision to step away from football and where I'm at now. But as you said, recently graduated here the day after SMU, so that was pretty crazy. And for all those that didn't get to see my Twitter, I decided to skip graduation, and I graduated. My girlfriend's mom has been a professor here for over 30 years. She wrote up a whole script. We went down to the Skeller, and I graduated at the Skeller. We did this whole thing. All like my family members were there, and they kind of like everybody shared some stories about me, and we just had fun at the Skeller instead of sitting in the BJC for like 3 hours doing nothing. So it was a lot more fun. I enjoyed it. So a lot of cool stuff going on, as you mentioned, all the film breakdowns, and then this is getting posted today, Tyler?
This is going to go up Wednesday. Yep.
Wednesday, yeah, okay, awesome. Well, I will by the time this goes up, I will have Penn State versus Notre Dame, a rivalry renewed. We sit down with Deion Butler, Derek Williams, Spider Caldwell, AQ Shipley, Guido D'Elia, the creator of the Whiteout. Really cool video recapping the historic matchup of Notre Dame Penn State, and it's more specifically about that last time we played 07, the first ever full stadium whiteout in Beaver Stadium. Coolest video I've ever done. I had to get it all done while I was doing 20 plus hours of film study, all that good stuff. So it's been a crazy grind. Got in my new studio this week. I've been here a lot, having a good time doing it though. So it's fun. And then I also got to have legendary Notre Dame running back Allar Pinkett on the pregame show yesterday. And so that was cool. He had back in 82, he had a 4-touchdown performance against Penn State. And then I think 83, he had a 3-touchdown performance. So a lot of cool stuff. You guys know if you follow me, we're always touching on the history too, as well as all the X's and O's. So really appreciate it. I've been on this podcast, I think 25 times, Tyler, as a recruit, as a player, and now as a media member. So I really appreciate you giving me a platform, man.
Now you're just another podcast host. You know, it's crazy. Yeah, I think the first time you came on, you might have been 15, 16 years old, something like that. And, you had a couple posts this week reminded me that Notre Dame was very much in the mix for your services back in that recruitment process. But I don't know who's watched more film this week, you or Nick Dawkins. Maybe it's up for debate. Yeah, he's probably watching less. He's probably watched less film than you across the field. But tell me, maybe just coming off of all that studying, what are maybe the 2 or 3 factors that you think are going to make the difference on Thursday night?
Yeah, so I mean, here's a couple things. Obviously, the blitz pickup is the biggest thing. Al Golden is an absolute madman, Notre Dame's defensive coordinator. We know him very well, being a tight end here back in the day. He will send exotic blitzes, and he's always messing with the offensive linemen and the running back's eyes in blitz pickup. However, he can slow them down a little bit, make them hesitate, and make sure he's testing the communication of your offensive line. Are you able to pass off stunts and blitzes and understand your assignment when he's firing linebackers, safeties, twist here, stunt there. So that is the biggest thing, I think, for our offense, being able to handle that blitz pickup. And then also in general, just the movement on the defensive line. They like to slant, they like to stunt, but in the run game, that's difficult. Sometimes, because you're going full speed and you say, all right, I'm a 300-pound dude. I'm going to put all my weight in this direction because I got another 300-pound dude in front of me, and I'm trying to move him from point A to point B. And then as the snap goes, they completely move to another gap. So it's quick processing. That is what Al Golden's defense thrives on. They are the most well-coached team and the most well-coached defense in all of college football, without a doubt. And so, it doesn't matter. This is what I said. With Al Golden, it doesn't matter which numbers are out on that field. It's all about the scheme because the players are bought in and they clearly trust him. Now, I haven't gotten to talk to anybody really from inside of that building. I really only know Rocco Spindler, but it's evident to me on tape that they love Al Golden. They want to play for him. It's a Manny Diaz type thing going on over there. And then, on the flip side, I would say our defense, obviously Riley Leonard is going to run the ball. He's not going to stretch the ball down the field. He had multiple games where he's similar to us at times, doesn't pass over 15 or 20 yards down the field. They don't stretch it at all. It's the run game. The biggest thing for me is stopping his quarterback runs. He'll run a lot of quarterback counter. And the biggest thing is they love like jet sweeps, jet motions. And he has the option to either hand it to the guy coming on this jet sweep, or he can just pull it and dive up the middle. So once again, a big thing for Notre Dame is putting if it's the defense they're going against or the offense, putting that team in conflict. They want to freeze your eyes for just a half a second, and then boom, they can go. So their biggest thing is I just think they're the most well-coached team in all of college football, Tyler, and that's why we're sitting here in the semifinals. And they have 4 or 5 starters on defense that started week 1 that are no longer playing because they're out for the year, and they haven't missed a beat. They truly haven't. So that is, like I said, credited to their coaching. And then my biggest thing to look out for, Xavier Watts. He's that high safety, number 0. I think Caleb Downs for Ohio State is the number 1 safety in America, and I think Xavier Watts is number 2. Obviously, I wish KJ Winston, we could be talking about him. I'm sure he'd be right up in there. But, unfortunately, things happen. And Xavier Watts is a real talented guy. I would say he has some of the best play recognition I've ever seen. And that's why they keep him as that high safety. He can basically be back there. He's that midfielder, see everything, and then boom, go get it. His acceleration, play recognition, and his ability to keep contained. He doesn't come down and fly into the flats and miss tackles. He breaks down. He makes sure he's kind of bouncing outside a little bit to say, hey, I'm going to force this all back in to my other 10 guys on the defense. I trust my guys. And a lot of times he makes the tackle anyways, but you can see that he always has the idea. He knows his responsibility. He knows when I have to keep contained. He knows when, a trick play is coming. He does a really good job of reading things and anticipating. So that's a guy to look out for. And really both their safeties, Schuler as well, number 8, had a really good game against Georgia. He's not all the way on the level as Watts, but a very good safety nonetheless. So obviously I think this defense is a lot better than the offense. And I think you can probably say the same thing for us generally. So it feels like a defensive game, Tyler.
Yeah, it feels like 24 points might get the job done for either team in this matchup. I think you look at a lot of the predictions across the industry, mine included, that would be the case. And we'll get to our predictions later, myself, Mark, and Daniel. But I want to get into a few things that you mentioned along the way there. And the first is what Al Golden's going to send in the direction of the opposing quarterback and versus where they were in the Sugar Bowl last week against Gunnar Stockton, having to step up to lead Georgia's offense. And obviously that wasn't a very comfortable situation for anyone affiliated with the Bulldogs. And then you look at Drew Allar, he's creeping up towards 30 career college starts. He's got a couple playoff wins under his belt. He had a Big Ten title game under his belt now. So how much of a difference do you think that makes? I spoke with Andy Kotelnicki yesterday, and he had a great line. He said coming into the season, Drew Allar was probably had a feel for the offense from A through M. Now he says it's from A through Z. So what do you make of Drew Allar's ability to counter what Al Golden's going to send his way in a very, very opportunistic fighting Irish defense?
Yeah, I mean, look, Gunnar Stockton there was a couple times he got lit up. I mean, they put him on he got put on his head pretty much. So I would Drew Allar's going to get hit. So, I mean, that's my biggest thing is Drew Allar, how can he respond in this game? Because we've seen him fired up, jacked up in the defense's face, screaming. But then we've also seen a Drew Allar that looks less confident. And it doesn't seem like it's all the way there in that game. So I think that's the number one thing. Can we get that Oregon Drew Allar, where I know we lost, but he was playing with nothing to lose. There was no fear. And I'm talking, 2 guys around his waist, Trey Wallace, double coverage, 4th down. I'm slinging it in there, no problem. That's the type of Drew Allar that we need in this game. Now, like you said, I think it's interesting that, obviously coming into Drew Allar, second year starting here, he is going to be more comfortable. I've seen the evolution of him. I remember the first spring walkthrough practice when he first got there. Obviously, Cliff was the starting quarterback that year, and Drew barely yelled the cadence. He was like, ready. And we're like, everybody's like, nah, that's not going to work, bro. That's not going to work. He has come a really long way from there. He has become a leader, and I'm extremely proud of him just as a person and as a friend. But I'll say this. Think back to the last time in a big matchup, maybe Ohio State this year, but let's say before this year. When was the last time Penn State had the quarterback advantage in a big-time matchup? I'm going back to Kerry Collins at that point, Tyler. I'm no hate on Mike Robb, a couple other guys, but I'm going back. You're going back to Kerry Collins. I feel like this is the first time we're in a big game. We have the quarterback advantage. It's not, hey, we have to overcome this, a really elite Justin Fields, CJ Stroud, and we have to work with what we got. No, we got the guy this time. Now it's just, can he put it all together and be that guy that we need him to be, that we know he can be? We've seen it. It's been put on tape, but can he just make it consistent in every single game? And now, especially in the biggest game of his career, it's all on the table there, Tyler.
For Notre Dame's quarterback, Riley Leonard, a lot of respect in South Bend. You can see in the way the teammates and coaches talk about him. He put his body on the line a bunch of times this season. That was on display in the Sugar Bowl. But I spoke with a Fighting Irish insider this week down here who's covered the team for decades. He said on a scale of 1 to 10, his confidence level in Riley Leonard winning the game with his arm, if it came down to that, is at a 1. So that tells me that Jeremiah Love is pretty darn important here, Landon. And he's a guy that may not be ready to be full go. We heard from Marcus Freeman about an hour ago, says that they're confident that Jeremiah Love's going to be able to play. They're trying to do everything they can to get him ready. But I've also heard that it may be a stretch to see him getting more than 10 touches over the course of this matchup. He's got 1,300 yards on the season. He's over 7 yards per carry. He's a dynamic presence for them in that backfield. And I think a lot of what Riley Leonard's been able to accomplish as a runner is because of the presence of Jeremiah Love. So if he is out of the equation altogether, or let's say he's limited over the course of Thursday night, what advantages does that bring up for this Nittany Lions defense working against Leonard and the Fighting Irish offense?
Yeah, I expect him to be limited. Anytime you're dealing with a running back and a knee injury, those do not coincide very well. We've seen that, in anybody's running back career, especially because he already had it and he re-injured it. Now, I do think when they let the media into practice and he's got this big, huge brace on, which he had been wearing, but he's limping, barely moving. I'm like, all right, this guy's putting on an Oscar performance right here. So
sandbagging, right? Yeah,
he was. I expect anywhere from 6 to 10 carries for him, but I don't think it's going to be a super heavy load. Personally, I'm a big fan of Jadarian Price, number 24, their backup running back. I thought there was a couple times where he pressed into the line of scrimmage, sucked the whole defense in, and then one cut, boom, outside, and he's going. So obviously he is not Love. He doesn't have that type of talent, but he is still a very explosive running back that's going to challenge us. I don't think the game plan is that different from last week. I'm going to be honest, Tyler. Coming in this game, it's a rushing attack, but it's the same idea of, and I said this, I've never had more fun studying the Penn State defense after Boise State. Everybody did their 111th. Tony Rojas, Abdul Carter went down. Amin Vanover came in, and I said all love and credit to Zakee Wheatley. He deserves it, but Amin Vanover probably could have been the at least co-defensive MVP of that game. That's something you kind of had to see after the game. Obviously, Zakee involved in 2 big turnovers, like I said, completely deserves it. But Amin's impact on that game was huge. We're going to need Amin Vanover again. But all those guys, they did their job. There was times where I just saw people fitting in their gap, and they didn't make the play, but Genty saw that they were in the gap and said, oh, not there, not there. And I did this on my film breakdown. There was so many times where Genty had nowhere to go, and it was a triangle. There was someone here, someone here, someone here, and there was all 3 angles. I called it the Bermuda Triangle. That's where we took him because he disappeared when going against that Penn State defense. Can we do the same thing against this Notre Dame offense? Because once again, they don't have the receivers to stretch the field. Faison and Bo Collins are decent wide receivers, but they're not needle movers for me. I think A.J. Harris, Jalen Kimber, and the guys are going to be able to kind of lock that up. Now, can we stop the run? Can we stop Riley Leonard from being able to dance around there for 5-6 seconds and then take off and be disruptive in that realm? I don't know who's going to be the QB spy. I would like to see Abdul Carter in that role. And I don't mean to transition too quickly, but for me, you're Abdul Carter. You clearly have, let's just call it shoulder, arm, whatever you want to say. You have a bad injury, and he probably should not be playing. Not probably. Anytime it's a shoulder injury that's at all severe to where the point where he couldn't play, you should not be playing 8 days later. I can guarantee you that. I've had 2 shoulder surgeries. So, but he's a baller. So I think he is going to play. And I tweeted this out. He is, knowing Abdul and playing with him, he feeds off of the doubt of him playing. He is, I mentioned Tom Brady, and Tom Brady said that he used to make things up in his head about his opponent. He's like, what? What'd you say about my mom? And, they didn't say anything about his mom, but that's the competitor. That's the type of a competitor that Abdul Carter is. And people are saying, no one's doubting his ability, Landon. What are you talking about? Oh, trust me. If you're saying that you don't think he's going to be at full capacity or full health, that's doubting Abdul in his head. So you're lighting a fire under him. Now, I'm not saying, there's still that possibility he goes out there on the first drive and it's like, hey, like an injury is an injury. There's a difference between being hurt and being injured. If you are just injured and your arm doesn't work all the way, you're actually just becoming a detriment to the team. Now, I would argue Abdul Carter, even at 70%, is better than most people. And so I would love to see him play that spy outside linebacker role a little bit more than defensive end, because let's talk about this. At defensive end, you're jacking into a 300-pound dude every single play. It hurts your shoulder. He's trying to bend the edge. I mean, you're putting yourself in compromising positions. Now, if you're at linebacker, you can just go hunt, be the cheetah that Abdul Carter is. And we saw it against Luke Altmaier in Illinois, where he was just standing there, and then Luke Altmaier rolled out, boom, Abdul Carter's gone and chasing him down. That's where I think he could have a bigger impact. And I want to limit the possibility of re-injuring that, because as we, obviously you can only take it one game at a time. It's the playoffs. But let's just say, you do all this to re-injure Abdul Carter, and let's say you win and you don't have Abdul Carter for a national championship run. Well, that really sucks. So, like I said, you can't save guys, but at the same time, you do have to think about that a little bit. I think that would be the best route to put Abdul Carter in, and still let him rush on third down if you want. I mean, that's complete. I think against Ben Knapp, their left tackle, he's a true freshman that's undersized. There's an advantage there, really, for anybody, any of our defensive ends, but especially Abdul Carter. So, I mean, once you get into third and long, if you maybe want to let Tony Rojas spy him, Riley Leonard, and let Abdul just rush. But I think Abdul needs to just be moved around. And in first and second down, he should not be a defensive end, just getting to, just having to go up against these 300-pound dudes, guards pulling on him, hitting him. That doesn't sound like a world that he should be in right now.
Landon, we got a few more minutes. I wanted to take it over to the offensive side of the things and go to, you talked about a fire being lit under Abdul this week, perhaps. A fire was lit under Kaytron Allen throughout the month of December. It has been remarkable to watch him deliver in the postseason. He's a guy, I've said it on this podcast a few times. There were times in October, November where I just felt like he was kind of just another guy in this offense. He was just kind of a supplemental piece. The efficiency wasn't there. The big runs weren't there. And you could kind of forget about him a little bit. Now he is a focal point, and it feels like you want to see him get the ball on the first play maybe in the Orange Bowl to see if he can maintain that. What do you think has been the key in the postseason for Kaytron for this rushing attack? Because it has hit a totally different level. And I think in a lot of ways it's forced a lot of us to recalibrate what we think this offense can accomplish.
Yeah. Everybody knows I shoot people straight, man. Kaytron Allen, when he gets going early, you don't stop him. But if it's not going great early, it doesn't normally end great for him either. So that's kind of like you said, let's give him the ball early and often. He feeds off of that momentum. And that is what we need to have against Notre Dame, and obviously starting fast. Now, talking about the logistics of why it's working, number one, Kaytron Allen's a straight-up baller, and he is hard to take down. Obviously, number two, we're playing two defenses that weren't very good. First off, in SMU, Boise State was the worst tackling team in all of the FBS. They were 134 out of 134, dead last. We're playing Notre Dame this weekend. They're top 10 in missed tackles, meaning that they're number 10. They don't miss very many tackles. So that is going to be a little bit different. It's not going to just be given to us this weekend where two broken tackles, 2-3 on one play is kind of a given against Boise State. No, these guys know how to wrap up and bring you down. So we have to go and take it. And a big piece for this offensive line is just going out there and being dominant. This defensive line from Notre Dame, like I said, doesn't matter who they plug in. They are really good. They're physical. They're fundamental in the sense that they play into the guards. They try to strike, and then they try to shed and find where the running back is. It's very physical. So, hey, the boys have to bring their hard hats. I'm excited for it. As you mentioned, obviously Nick Dawkins and the guys, I know they're ready. I was just talking to Trout the other day. Really excited for this matchup for them. And obviously against a Boise State blitz that we struggled with. And you best believe Coach Trout that was eating at him all week long, wanting to fix that, wanting to make sure that was, not something that could happen again going into another playoff game. And you can't have something break down like that where they were running the same blitz over and over and over. Boise State's defense was, and we had no answer. And it really wasn't that difficult of an answer. But you can't be afforded that against Notre Dame. You're not gonna get outcoached versus Notre Dame and still win. You can get somewhat outcoached versus Boise State and win because they were Mountain West. But it's not going to happen on Thursday night. We have to be basically equally as well coached. And I think the talent levels, I think it definitely leans towards Penn State being a little more talented. But as I said, I do feel that Notre Dame is the most well-coached team in college football. So it really evens out. I'm excited for it. Like you said, Kaytron Allen getting the running game going early is going to be important. Don't put this game all on Drew Allar and that passing attack because it's going to be hard to get it going. They're going to bracket Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren's still going to get his. But I mean, if you think about Boise State did a great job against Tyler Warren. He's Tyler Warren, so he got open. Now he had 2 touchdowns where he just went up over top of someone and grabs it in the back of the end zone. And the first touchdown where Drew had hours and hours back there versus the 4-man pass rush for Boise State, and then finally found him in the back. But Boise State, for the most part, it was like every play, where's 44, ID 44. So my big thing for me, Tyler, is I need Kotonicki to scheme this game a little bit better. The screen passes to Tyler Warren that are like kind of misdirection. Well, that doesn't work when everybody on the defense is keying 44. Okay, let's go screen pass to Amari Evans. If they're bringing that axe blitz, let's go let Drew hot route audible. Let's get a quick slant over the middle. If they're going to bring both linebackers, hike 1-2, boom, over the middle. So this is where I need Kotonicki. I need Drew to take that next step in this game and out-coach, out-game plan Al Golden and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. That's where I'm at, Tyler.
Just want to take a moment to spotlight how cool it is to get perspective on Kaytron Allen from somebody who blocked for Kaytron Allen in his first career college game on the road to Purdue back in 2022. And down there at Auburn, you were blocking for these guys when they had a big breakout moment, Nick Singleton and Kaytron. So very cool to see you kind of now channel this into the evaluation side of things. And Landon, speaking of evaluation, let's go with your forecast for Thursday night, 7:30 kickoff. We're under 33 hours from this matchup between Penn State and Notre Dame. Where do you see this one trending, and ultimately, what do you think the final score is?
Yeah, I think this one's going to come down to the last play. First, let me say, and this goes for any game, so it's easy to say, but it truly is this game. Who makes more mistakes? Whoever wins the turnover battle, they're going to win this game. That's how I feel. I'll go 20-17. We'll call it a Ryan Barker walk-off game-winning field goal win for Penn State and Indy Lions.
There you go. I think a lot of people would take that one. We'll give you our predictions a little bit later here in the episode. Make sure you're tracking all of Landon's coverage, and it's going to continue into 2025, obviously. Behind the Wall with Landon Tengwall over at YouTube. Landon, anything else to add while we got you in front of an audience?
No, all good. Yeah. Follow me at Behind the Wall with Landon Tengwall on YouTube, as you said, and you can find me at Landon Tengwall on Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. I will be live tweeting the game, so that can get a little interesting at times. I have some fun with it, but it gets intense for sure. But no, I appreciate you guys, and thanks for always having me on, Tyler. I really appreciate coming on here, and been 6-7 years running now, and sure we'll do it a lot more in the future.
Yeah, proud of you, man. Congratulations. Thanks for hopping on with us. Fun week down here in South Florida. Hopefully we'll get a chance to see you in Atlanta if Penn State advances, and we'll get there when we get there. Thanks, man.
Thank you so much, Tyler.
Let's continue this episode of the Lions 24/7 podcast with our colleagues from Lions 24/7, Daniel Gallen, Mark Brennan. We all made the trip down here to South Florida on Tuesday. We're all relatively fresh out of a joint press conference between Marcus Freeman and James Franklin. It's the last press conference that we're set to partake in before kickoff of the Orange Bowl. Gentlemen, good to be doing this outside with you. Mark's under a tiki hut by the pool. We've got Daniel, as you can see, maybe you can't, kind of in a bar seat situation with the resort behind him. And I'm just about 50 yards away from Daniel here, posted up outside of our hotel. So nice to do a little bit of a change in location. We had Mark from the desert while I was still up north for the Fiesta Bowl. And I think Daniel was somewhere in a bathroom at that point. But we've got all three of us together before the Orange Bowl. Mark, you covered a bunch of these big bowl games. You've been to this one before, but it's a playoff game again. Second straight week, we got the bowl/playoff scenario for Penn State. What are you picking up about the nature of this matchup?
Well, just to quit, we're at the Le Meridien. It used to be called something else. I was actually at this hotel in 90 and 91 when Penn State played in back-to-back blockbuster bowls. So things kind of come full circle. But it is really weird that, after covering, I don't even know how many bowls it is, every one since 89, I think the Holiday Bowl, this just has a completely different vibe to it. I mean, everything is so compressed. They're trying to do everything so quickly, and understandably so. I mean, they have to, especially with poor Notre Dame that lost a couple days. So just not your typical bowl feel, not even the same as the Fiesta Bowl, where we were fortunate enough to have a full media day, all the players available. Here, only a handful of players available yesterday. The coordinators were available, which was great. And then really no on-site access to James Franklin other than the big blowout joint press conference, which, you rarely get a whole heck of a lot out of that. We got some Abdul Carter semi-news out of it today, which I'm sure we'll get into. But just a completely different vibe. I mean, bowls just aren't what they used to be. And I'm not saying that's good. I'm not saying that's bad. It's just completely different with everything compressed down to these short windows.
Daniel, Mark referenced it right there. Abdul Carter did come up in the press conference with James Franklin, and it certainly sounds a little bit more positive than we got on Saturday when it started to sound fairly positive from James Franklin. But he called it a game-time decision, but he also noted that they expect Abdul Carter to play. How much and to what effect, we don't know yet, but that's the latest on number 11.
Yeah, the word that Franklin used was that they anticipate Abdul Carter playing, which I think is in line with what we've heard from James Franklin in the past about these types of things and the way that he handles injuries. I think game time decision is maybe the most definitive thing that we've heard. And, I think that he said that before with some of these injuries, guys like Drew Allar and Dennis Sutton, when they were banged up earlier this year, Franklin would say, we're going to take it all the way up to, as late as we can to get these guys ready. And Franklin also said over the weekend that they needed to see Abdul Carter in practice. And I kind of interpreted that as they need to see him in there so they know how much he can do, how they can use him, how this injury might affect him. But I think where we are right now, it's Wednesday at 11 a.m. I guess some Penn State fans can make a wish that Abdul Carter will be healthy to play. But it looks like things are trending in that direction for Carter.
Mark, this is a matchup, and we just saw Penn State go up against Ashton Genty and Boise State. We knew what their plan of attack was on the offensive side of things, and maybe not all that different with Notre Dame, the way they've preferred to run the football. There is a question, as I just brought up with Landon Tengwall in the last segment, about Jeremiah Love, their leading rusher, and his ability to be full go for this game. But when you think about SMU matchup, the Boise State game, the way Penn State handled itself on the ground, and factor in that Abdul Carter is a bit of a question for how much he'll play. How do you feel about, on the surface, the styles of play, defense versus offense here, and maybe do you see an advantage for the Nittany Lions?
I do. I mean, I think, and I wrote to my prediction, which you didn't read, obviously. I'm just joking. We were having some banter beforehand, but hold on a second. There's somebody walking by here that I'm just getting a kick out of. But anyway, I'll try to spit it out here. But the Penn State defense has basically been training at altitude, right? I mean, for how many weeks were they preparing for Genty? I mean, I know they say they take it one game at a time, but they knew who was kind of looming out there if they got past SMU. SMU was a good rushing team as well. So they've been preparing to face a great back. So if Love plays, I mean, he's a sprinter who can do great things. And, he's a great back. But Genty is the great back. And they did a great job. So I think that gives them a distinct advantage, especially against a team that hasn't shown that it's going to be able to take the lid off and beat you deep. To me, when you looked at the matchup with Oregon and Penn State, the job that Dylan Gabriel did, not necessarily going deep, but keeping Penn State honest with the passing game, I don't know that Notre Dame could do that. So if it comes down to Penn State being able to stop the run, they just did it against the best running back in the nation. And, you held him to 3.5 yards per carry. I'm not saying they're necessarily going to do that exact same thing in this game. But again, I think they've been kind of training at altitude, preparing for this sort of offense.
Yeah, and I'll just note that against SMU, it went off the rails fast for the Mustangs that Saturday in Beaver Stadium, but they had a dynamic weapon at running back, Brashard Smith, that people were talking about all week leading up to that game, and he was a relative non-factor. So you've got a nice sample size. But, Daniel, the caveat here, I suppose, and although we had the Lamar Jackson comparisons for Kevin Jennings a couple weeks ago, we have tangible proof in the playoffs of what Riley Leonard can do with his legs. You look at how important that was last week against Georgia. He's done it all season long. I think he's got 15 touchdowns on the ground. I caught up with Riley Leonard for a bit on Tuesday, and he was very self-deprecating about himself as a runner. He said he doesn't feel like he has any real plus traits. He can't juke anybody out. He doesn't really understand why he's an effective runner, but clearly he is. So when you talk about this specific angle of the matchup for the Penn State defense, and if Abdul Carter perhaps wasn't healthy enough to be a full spy for the entire game, like Landon Tengwall just suggested he could be, what do you think about Leonard's dual threat abilities versus this Penn State defensive front?
It's definitely a tough matchup for Penn State, and I think that Riley Leonard is a little bit of a different type of runner. I think his physicality, his running between the tackles, that's something that stands out to me. Like, 6'4", 216, he's not afraid to run it up the gut. And he's going to take a beating, and he's going to try to give out a beating. I think he's a little bit different from what we saw and talked about with Kevin Jennings in that respect. But it's definitely a matchup. I mean, I think that we saw those kind of plaster drills that we saw from the defensive backs during that one open practice before SMU. I think that that's something that is going to come into play. But Penn State's been tested by these dual threat guys throughout the year, so I don't necessarily think there's anything too unusual that maybe Riley Leonard could throw at Penn State. Maybe he might remind me a little bit of, maybe we'll see some similar things like we saw from Will Howard in the running game, just because of their physiques and some designed runs for them. But I think Penn State should be up to the task. I think that Riley Leonard definitely has their attention, and they'll be ready to go. It'll be a fun matchup.
And I will say that I see those similarities between Howard and Leonard, not just in the way they carry the football, but in kind of the way they fire up their team when they carry the football. They will do some of that jawing. I know we've seen Drew Allar, do some chirping at the end of runs too, but Leonard is very much a guy who can be a kind of energy catalyst for this offense with some of the runs. So I think the big deal is, can you land a punch on him early in this game, whether it's an Abdul Carter, a Kobe King, a Denida, and a Sutton, a Zane Durant, and kind of try to set the tone in your own regard from physical demeanor. I mean, when it comes to setting the tone, Katron Allen has been exemplary in that, Mark Brennan, over the course of the postseason. He erupted for a big game against Oregon. He has not slowed down since. I think it's very important for us to gauge where he's at early in this game, because if he's still got the goods, this Penn State team is going to be a tough out for Notre Dame or anybody in this playoff tournament. What do you make of the Singleton-Allen dynamic going into this matchup, the kind of momentum that they have built on the ground, going up against a Notre Dame team that is, quite frankly, on a very, very different level than the defenses that Penn State has faced in the postseason so far?
I think the key for Penn State is going to be balance, and that's where I think the emergence of the ground game late in the season. The ground game was pretty good all year, but in certain games it didn't really step up to the level that we thought it was going to. In the playoffs, I mean, it's been – even against Oregon, I mean, things just really have been taken to a different level. And I think when you get that much production from your ground game, it's going to make life, I don't want to say easier, because this is going to be a tremendous defense that they're facing, but it should take pressure off of Drew Allar. I mean, if you look at what happened last week, even when Boise State was able to do some things to blitz and ultimately get to Allar, Penn State was able to counter that with the running game. And, ultimately, the net sum was that Penn State won rather handily. So I don't think it's any coincidence whatsoever. And it's been a theme in the press conferences we were at yesterday. These days are kind of running together, that you have two teams that run the ball so well that are at this level. I just think it's very difficult to have this sort of sustained success when we're talking 15, 16, 17 games. Yeah, you may catch fire with your passing game and knock off one opponent, and that's what I love about this. But if you're not balanced and you don't have that consistent ground game, I think you could be in a little bit of trouble. And both of these teams have it. I mean, even if Love doesn't play, you talked about the quarterback can run it extremely well. And they have, it's not as if as if Love is their only running back. They've recruited extremely well at that position too. So that, to me, seeing that at this time of year, I love it. I love seeing two teams that run the ball that well. But from Penn State's perspective, ground game's great, but I think it's going to be all about balance.
Daniel, we don't know if both of these defenses will have their way with the opposing rushing attack, but I think it's pretty clear that's priority number one for both Penn State and Notre Dame. So let's talk about a scenario where neither Notre Dame nor Penn State is having much success on the ground, and all of a sudden it's pinned on the shoulder of your quarterback a little bit more. I feel like there's a clear advantage for Penn State in that circumstance. While we still have questions about the perimeter, James Franklin has taken a couple opportunities this week to say how he feels about this receiver group. I know you're going to have something up at Lions247.com, but when you talk about the dynamic where if this isn't Katron Allen, Nick Singleton getting them to the national championship, it's got to be more of a Drew Allar, Tyler Warren, receivers contributing type game. Where do you think the confidence level is right now for the Nittany Lions?
I think that there's a lot of confidence in Drew Allar from Penn State. Everything that we've heard about where his confidence is right now, some of the throws that he made in that first half against Boise State, I think that he's really confident. I think he's playing at a pretty high level right now, and I think that he's someone who is dialed into the moment. That's something that we hear a lot about Drew Allar, is that he is sort of a student of the game, and I think he understands these scenarios. He talks about all the film he watches, all the games that he watches. This is something that is really, really important to him. And when he gets his moment, he wants to be ready for it. So, I do think that you feel good about Drew Allar. Like you said, there probably are some questions out on the perimeter, but Omari Evans is coming on decently strong. I think, 3 touchdown catches in the past 5 games. He's been that deep threat over the top that people have wanted to see for a while. Trey Wallace is having, I think, a pretty quietly nice year. At one point, is averaging 16 yards per catch. That's a good number considering where this passing game was a year ago. And so, Tyler Warren, if you're going to put the ball on Drew Allar's shoulders, you're also putting it on Tyler Warren's shoulders as well, I think. And he's playing well right now. So I do think that you feel pretty good about it. I think that if this does become an air attack and you put it on the right arms of these quarterbacks, I think you should feel good about Drew Allar. But he'll have to rise up to the moment. He'll have to have one of those, I think, signature outings in a big game that we haven't quite seen from him yet.
Across the field, you've got a defensive coordinator that Penn State fans are very familiar with. Mark, you are as well. Al Golden, former Penn State tight end, and it's been talked about this week. He happened to catch a touchdown against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish in an upset victory a couple decades ago, actually 3 decades ago. And Mark, if I'm not mistaken, you were covering that particular Penn State team. You're covering this team that now sees Al Golden show up to the press conference in Notre Dame gear and trying to do what he can to knock the Nittany Lions out of the playoffs. Daniel had a story up on Lions247.com about this on Tuesday, but I want to hear from you as someone who's covered Al Golden, the player. You were around when it was rumored that he might be the next head coach of the Nittany Lions not too long ago before James Franklin came on board. What do you think about how this one shapes up? Really cool storyline here in South Florida.
Yeah, Al Golden, that iconic photo of him at Notre Dame was taken by our Harvey Levine. And you guys know this, but our audience doesn't. The guy who became my brother-in-law, Eric Wayne, the great Eric Wayne, a former Penn State manager, is behind him getting the football. It's pretty funny. Now, when Al's wife got that photo made into a painting, they erased my brother-in-law from it. So I think that's kind of a rough move on her part. But it's been really good to see. Listen, sometimes you wonder when things don't work out for a coach, like out of Miami. And that's pretty cool here, too, is that there were like Miami folks being able to talk to Al Golden, Miami media people. And he just handled himself just extremely well with the Penn State people, with the Miami people, with everybody. But he's kind of resurrected his career. I mean, sometimes you wonder if when things don't work out, whether in college or the NFL, if guys may just move on. And I think he's put himself in position now where he's going to be a viable head coaching candidate again. And that's good to see. I mean, if you're a Penn State fan, you're not rooting for him in this game, but you're rooting for him, I think, all the time, all the rest of the time, if I can spit it out, because I think he's represented Penn State really well, and he's obviously doing a really good job at Notre Dame. So it's a great storyline. I had a chance to talk to him quickly, and he talked about how when his playing career was over, he ended up going to Virginia, and George Welsh, who was a Joe Paterno assistant way back in the day, was coaching Virginia, and he said, I have a GA spot open. That's all I have at linebacker. And Al's like, I'll take it, and that's how he became a defensive coach. So you never know how these things are going to play out, but it was good to see a friendly face that, I hadn't seen in quite a while, and good to see what he's doing with Notre Dame. Again, if you're a Penn State fan, don't root for him this week, but after this and going forward, wherever you see him, he's been nothing but a great representative of Penn State.
We had a big chunk of time yesterday, Tuesday, within a few hours of all of us landing here in South Florida and getting to the hotel, which is where these press conferences are taking place. And we were kind of scattered about Notre Dame players, Penn State players, coordinators from both programs. Daniel, I just want to open the microphone for you a bit. Anything you'd like to share from the conversations you had with Notre Dame staff, Notre Dame players, and same deal with Penn State? Just kind of an open opportunity to get some stuff out for our audience before we get into this matchup.
I think over on the Penn State side, I had a really long conversation with Cam Miller, the junior cornerback. He's a Florida native. He said that he didn't really have too many Orange Bowl memories growing up watching it, but he said that he's from Jacksonville, which is still a couple hours from here, if my Florida geography is right. But he said he'll have more friends and family in the stands than he normally does, and so that was pretty cool to hear from him. But he's someone who's a little bit more on the quiet side when we talk to him. Doesn't really give too much away, but I thought he gave some really good insight over the course of talking to him. I mean, he said that this year's team does feel different than the past two that he's been on at Penn State, that there is something different about it that has really helped them get this far in the season and weather some of the things that they're going for. He was really excited about the young cornerbacks in the room, John Mitchell, Kenny Woosley, Antoine Belgrave-Shorter, who's now in the safety room. But he had really good feedback on them and where they are. And he had really good things to say about Omari Evans as well, someone that he came in with and has played a lot of football with. And so, I think that hearing from someone like that, who you can pin down as a, pretty reliable narrator, given what he does or doesn't say in usual media settings, to see him loosened up a little bit, I think spoke to the mood of this team and where they are and how they feel coming into this game. So, I thought that was an interesting conversation. Spent some time with Liam Clifford. He said that he and his brother Sean, they've got a lot of family from Indiana and Illinois, so they grew up as Notre Dame fans. Went to one or two games per year because they had a family member in law school in South Bend. Liam Clifford said it was actually at a a Notre Dame USC game when he decided, I want to be a college football player. He couldn't remember what year it was, but he said there was a big goal line stand for Notre Dame against the Trojans, and just seeing that, being in that type of environment, was really something that he wanted to be part of. And now he acknowledged too that this is kind of a cool, classic college football matchup. When you talk about helmet games, programs with a lot of tradition, programs that are run and handle themselves in similar ways. So I thought those were two cool things I heard from Penn State guys who aren't necessarily the stars, not necessarily the guys that you see making plays every Saturday, but have some really good insight into this team.
I'll just say it picked up I think that the word surreal was used a couple times by Penn State players yesterday, just about the fact that we are into the second week of January. They're here, one of the last four teams standing. I think they all thought this was something that was attainable for them, but to be living in the moment, it's kind of cool to see them in live time processing the situation and the fact that they're one win away from the national championship. It's also really good to get some of the feedback we have on the freshman involvement. A bunch of these early enrollees came to campus in December, late December. They were part of the Fiesta Bowl prep. They went down to Arizona. A bunch of them are down here at the Orange Bowl. They were practicing with Penn State last. We saw this team in action on Sunday back on campus. And James Franklin says he'll do it again. He says he had some apprehension about adding early enrollees during postseason preparation like this, but it really seems like they had some long, clear conversations, the leaders on this team, the coaching staff, with these newcomers about what exactly their role is going to be within the program these few weeks, and they have abided by that. And so you'd hope it's a head start for the future. We talked a lot about this with Tyler Calvaruso a couple episodes ago about the impact of that group. In terms of what you picked up, Mark, from kind of that scrum yesterday with the players and coaches, anything worth sharing from your end?
I just want to say one thing. The media hospitality suite is right here, otherwise known as the free beer room, and the workout room is right here. So I'm getting a true sense of priorities. What time are we at? 11, almost 11:30 of who's going for free beer and who's going to work out. And I'm not going to name names, but you might be surprised at who's showing up at either of those. But the way Tom Allen handled questions about Indiana. So Notre Dame's here. There's obviously a bunch of reporters from Indiana, not that cover Indiana per se, but from the state of Indiana. And, some of that came up about how well Indiana did. But Andrew Clay of WTAJ asked a really good question. I would have asked it a different way, and I wouldn't have gotten as good an answer. What I would have said is, Tom, were you able to get any intel on Notre Dame from your old Indiana players? And, because Indiana, obviously, for people who haven't been paying close attention, what am I saying? Everybody's watching this and paying close attention. Indiana was eliminated by Notre Dame in the opening round. What Andrew asked, and I'm paraphrasing this, is have you talked to your former players about kind of redeeming them, about winning one kind of for them? And he basically said yes. I mean, in the way that Tom Allen does it, in nothing but a classy way. And, he said you invest so much into these players, and again, I'm paraphrasing, and you develop these lifetime relationships, and that's what I'm all about. And I was like, whoa, I mean, this is why you get a sense of why players love this dude, because, these are guys from last year who had just great success, and that he's happy for them. And then somebody said, one of the Indiana reporters, what do you think about everything that happened at Indiana? Opening with 10 straight wins, climbing up to number 5. They didn't say all that, but I'm saying that for anybody who, again, everybody already knows that. But complete class act. He was fired from that job right before the program took off. And however you want to say, would it have happened? Would it have not happened? That's not the debate. What I'm saying is this guy was asked about a very sticky situation. He said, yeah, I love to see what happened for my former players. I know the work they put in. I mean, just a complete class act. And, not that I expected anything different, but to see him in that setting with all these TV cameras around him, I thought that was pretty cool. And then Kotelnicki, I asked him how this last year has been on his family, this last 13 months, because think about it. Early December, last 2023, I was almost said last year, he comes to Penn State and he's immediately with the program, even though he didn't take over as OC until January. He's been going nonstop since. And he really praised his wife for being the rock of his family. And I know that's not X's and O's football talk, but, sometimes I think we forget what the wives and the kids go through, and to hear him kind of explain it that way, I just, he's a guy who has a real sense of humor. He likes kidding around with us, but you could tell he wasn't emotional, but you could tell how much it meant to him what his family has had to go through. And he said, if both of them kind of said, if my family ever said they didn't want me to coach, I wouldn't do it, but they know what it means to me. And that's pretty cool stuff to hear from coaches, because I don't think people understand that's a 24/7 every day, every week, and now it's worse than ever. So those are a couple of things that I heard that really stood out to me.
We've got a whole breakdown of Kotelnicki's time with media up at Lions247.com. And by the way, I thought it was just referencing the impact of family on his career. He talked about looking back at his humble Division III origins in the coaching world. He used to get into the office with his wife and put together the call sheets and cross-reference with his wife, because he said at that level, you don't have GAs, you don't have assistants, you are in charge of everything. And so it's been cool to kind of track him the last year. And he's does that often, looking back at the appreciation of his path. He hadn't spent a lot of time in the blue blood world until now. Just a little bit to pass along as we empty the notebook on Notre Dame. We have a full Know the Foe breakdown that we have from a Fighting Irish insider at Lions247.com. But a lot of praise for Jeremiah Love and what he means to that offense. So I think if he is limited to 10 or fewer carries, or he can't go at all, which we don't expect to be the case, but that could really do some things to the dynamics of that Notre Dame offense. They think very highly of him. Again, I mentioned this earlier with Landon Tengwall, but there's not a lot of confidence that if it were come down to it for Notre Dame, that Riley Leonard and this pass attack are going to be in a situation to go win it against Penn State. And then defensively, there is some optimism. Landon mentioned this as well, that Xavier Watts, standout safety for this Notre Dame team, can maybe have that blueprint that they used with Caleb Downs and the defensive backfield for Ohio State to limit Tyler Warren in that matchup in early November, that maybe Notre Dame is the biggest threat to have an answer for Tyler Warren other than that Ohio State defense, which you might have to face again down the road. And then one more note here, Devin Ford, guy that was on this podcast back when he was coming to campus as an enrollee, as a top 100 prospect, spent several seasons with Penn State. He is pretty beloved, as it would turn out, in that Notre Dame locker room. He's a guy that some of those players call Coach Devin. He's a sixth-year player. He's viewed as an integral piece of what they do on special teams. And I want to pass along, we heard from Riley Leonard, also heard from Jordan Faison, or wide receiver at Notre Dame, that Devin Ford delivered a message to this team early in the week. It was a very personal message. It was about touching on his time at Penn State, and I'm told that there was an edge to it. So just some things out there from the other side of this conversation this week, and let's get into the players.
One thing, though, Tyler, come on. An edge, the guy was at 2 Penn State games this year. He's still buddies with all the guys at Penn State. There's no edge. And if he's the coach of that team, they're in trouble, because he was the guy against Indiana who all he had to do was take a knee, and he ends up scoring. So against Tom Allen, no less. But no, hey, nothing but love for Devin Ford. He was a good guy. Seriously, when he was here.
Mark, that's easy for you to say after bringing up the Indiana game like that.
Well, I mean, it's true, right? What is his lasting memory? But the whole thing about an edge, it's like he's on the sideline hugging the intern and saying hello to everybody, and he's a genuinely nice kid.
Yes. He's
not bringing any edge against Penn State. I get what they're talking about. But I think that kid is going to be devoted to Penn State and Notre Dame for his entire life. Maybe not in this game, but yeah. I mean, when you said that he was coaching the team, I'm like, oh my God, we know what to do if it's a close game at the end. Just let Notre Dame score and then come back and.
Well, we'll leave it at that with Devin, and we'll see what he can do for the game.
Sorry, Devin. And, if you're watching this, I apologize.
But let's get into our players to watch now. And Daniel, we'll begin with you. Who is the Penn State player here that you have in the spotlight?
I think I'd go with Kaytron Allen. He's someone who we've talked a lot about over the past month. We've seen a lot of the past month. He's just playing at a high level. And he's someone who can really be a tone setter for you over the course of this game. You know, we talked about it a little bit earlier, Tyler. Like, if you give Kaytron Allen 3 carries on that first drive, you can figure out pretty early on how this game is going to go, whether Notre Dame is up to the task, if Notre Dame wants to do it, and just how they're going about their business. So, I think you start with Allen, and you kind of go from there. I think it's going to be a physical game up front. And Kaytron Allen is someone who can really, really help you, kick things off there.
Mark, who do you got? Player to watch?
I'm going to go with Trey Wallace. I think Al Golden is a great defensive coordinator. He's a former tight end. And I don't care how good Penn State's running game is. I think priority number 1 for him is going to be limiting Tyler Warren. Priority number 2 is going to be limiting the running game. I don't know if you could have a priority number 3, and maybe that opens things up for a guy like Trey Wallace in this game to make some plays. Notre Dame is a really good defense, but one of those receivers, I think, whether it's him, whether it's Evans, they're kind of the guys. But I'm going to go with Trey Wallace. I think at least one of them is going to have to step up in this game for Penn State to win.
Daniel referenced tone setting with Kaytron Allen. I'm going to take the same approach and go defense and say deny Dennis Sutton, because I don't know what this will look like for Abdul Carter come kickoff and these initial defensive series. But I know that deny Dennis Sutton with Carter on the field, without Carter on the field, these playoffs has taken the next step. He was a 3rd-team all Big Ten performer during the regular season, but he's playing at a different level right now in the postseason. He's got 4 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks the last couple games, 10 total tackles, and it's going beyond the stat sheet. I know that there were some extracurriculars against Boise State that may have rubbed some people the wrong way, but some of that passion and some of that enthusiasm is exactly what you're going to need, because Notre Dame's going to bring that to the field. Their offense, their quarterback is going to bring that to the field. They're riding their own high right now coming off the Sugar Bowl. So to me, very important that a guy like Denai Dennis-Sutton can set that tone for you defensively, where that's physically getting a hit on Riley Leonard as he tries to lower his shoulder and work through the Penn State defense, or if it's just chatting like he tends to do down there in the trenches. I think he is the kind of guy that can help you psychologically in a matchup like this and maybe give Penn State a little bit more of an advantage as this game goes on with his play. Daniel, Mark, it's prediction time. We heard from Landon earlier. He's got Penn State winning by a last-second field goal from Ryan Barker, 20-17. We'll begin with you for this one, Mark.
Yeah, I think Penn State had the bonus of being able to watch that Georgia game, the Notre Dame Georgia game, and if you watch the way that thing played out, Notre Dame did kind of what it does. Really well coached team, did not do a whole heck of a lot on offense, used great defense, created turnovers. I'm counting on my hands down here, and had a huge special teams play. And they're going to have to do that same thing to beat Penn State. And I don't know that they could have all of those ducks fall in a row. As I mentioned, I think Penn State's been training for this kind of ground game at altitude when they were getting ready to face SMU and then Genty. I actually think Penn State's going to win this one pretty handily. One of those games where maybe they get a late touchdown to make it look a little worse than it was, but I'm going 34-21, a big one for Penn State in this one.
Daniel, what do you think?
I think I'm on the other side of Mark on this one when in terms of how I think this game will go, how I think it'll come down to at the end. Like I said, I think it's just going to be a really, really physical game. I think the X factor is whether or not Penn State can hit on a couple deep shots. We saw them really testing those Boise State corners again and again. And if you're Penn State, if you can get, maybe those linebackers to back up a step, the safeties to back up 2 or 3 steps, maybe that opens things up underneath, for Nick Singleton, for Katron Allen. So I think that passing game will be a little bit of an X factor. But I do think, like Landon, this is going to come down to the leg of Ryan Barker. I have a final score of 19-16. I think we're looking at 4 field goals from Ryan Barker, and at least 2 of those will be from at least 40 yards. I don't necessarily know if we'll see like an overtime game winner or, something else late in the game to seal the win. But I think that you look at Penn State, you look at the leg of Ryan Barker, this is one of those games that will be won in that fashion.
By the way, we're working off of a betting spread, 1.5 points for Notre Dame. So they're the favorite in this matchup. Obviously, Mark's got Penn State winning by a lot more than most. Daniel's got a close affair. I also think it's going to be one that we're paying very close attention to, with pressure on both sides, down to the wire. I agree with James Franklin. I think he said it well when they're built similar to us regarding Notre Dame and Penn State. But I see beyond those commonalities some key advantages for Penn State. I think both the offensive backfields are dynamic, and they've gotten the teams to this point in some ways. But Notre Dame's is dealing with an injury, and Penn State's happens to be peaking at the exact perfect time. Both of these teams have big-bodied quarterbacks who can do damage with their legs, more so Riley Leonard than Drew Allar. But these are guys who can move the chains. They can get it done in short yard situations. But Allar is the superior passer, and I think he has the superior passing attack. And then both of these secondaries, they pride themselves on being able to handle their business downfield in sticky coverage, man-to-man settings when it's necessary. But to me, Penn State's more proven in finding and exploiting issues downfield with its passing attack than Notre Dame is. And so I put that all together. I think it's a game that's hanging in the balance late, but Penn State wins 23-17. I agree with Landon and with you, Daniel. Ryan Barker is going to be a notable presence in this matchup. I think he will kick 3 field goals along the way. And then my bold prediction here is Notre Dame possessing the ball in Penn State territory, less than 6 minutes to play. That threat ends when the Nittany Lions come down with an interception. I didn't write it for Mark's predictions piece, but I'll say Jalen Reed on this podcast. I'll say Jalen Reed is the man who comes down with the key interception late, intercepting Riley Leonard and helping Penn State get to the national title game in Atlanta. So if we're all right, we've got yet another week here in January to cover football, and Penn State will be playing a 17th game. Just sounds outrageous to say out loud. But, guys, Mark, I know you want to do a cannonball into that pool. We got lunch coming out here for the media folks, and that's going to do it for this episode. So, Mark, Daniel, appreciate it, and we'll see what this game has in store for us on Thursday.
Thanks, Tyler.
That's going to do it for this episode of the Lions 24/7 podcast as Mark fades away on us. And I'm Tyler Donahue. They are Daniel Gowan and Mark Brennan. Before them, you heard from Landon Tengwall. We're back with a post-game podcast late from South Florida Thursday night, Daniel and I. For now, check out our coverage at lions247.com.